the Dugs! I'm Johnny Paprika and I'm bored. The off-season is upon us, and in the span of a week, the hot stove went from tepid to hot pockets on the roof of your mouth hot to the Matrix level of there is no stove after Rob Manfred announced the lockout last Thursday. But don't worry, the Dugs has got you, baby. Welcome to the only fresh source of baseball that currently matters in experimental baseball tournaments.
Credit where credit is due. I got this idea while browsing the baseball subreddit. It's a great source for all things baseball during the year, but during the off season, a little something they like to affectionately call shitposts start to creep in. Two of my favorite shitposts of all time were submitted by a user named Camley75. He ran an experiment in the baseball management game Out of the Park Baseball to see how a team of 25 Phil Cokes, the aptly named Philadelphia Cokes, would fare in a major league season. He also created a sequel to this post that went through a similar exercise with the San Jose Cansecos. They're great reads and I recommend you check them out. We'll put the links in the description. So, in proper 90s baseball form, we've taken that general idea and pumped that sumbitch full of steroids, and we believe will be the thing that carries you through this offseason. Let's get into it. We've created 8, let's call them extremely flawed teams, and we'll be running them through a tournament to see who comes out on top. We'll be bringing the action of these games to you in SportsCenter-esque highlight reels eventually. But for now, let's dive into the format and the first batch of teams. The 8 teams are split into 2 groups of 4. Each team plays the other teams in their group twice, once home and once away. The top 2 teams from each group advance to the playoffs. And the playoffs are quite simple. We cross-pollinate a little bit, pitting the top team from Group A against the second place team from Group B and vice versa. And all the series in the Final Four play out in a traditional best-of-7 fashion until we reach the first ever Dugs champion. Let's meet Group A, shall we? Deliberately offensive. 25 of the most elite hitters from throughout baseball history playing in one of the most hitter-friendly ballparks of all time. Let's go over the projected starting lineup. In right field, you have Mel Ott, on base over 41% of the time in his career. In center field, Tris Speaker. Just look at that year he had in 1916. He led the league in pretty much everything, and he also stole 35 bases. In left field, we have the Bambino. Hasn't played for quite some time, but still is the career leader in WAR, OPS, OPS Plus, and slugging. At first base, Jimmy Fox. 5th highest career OPS of all time. At second base, you have Rogers Hornsby with a career batting average of .359. At shortstop, you have 2-time MVP Robin Yount. At third base, it's a 500-plus home run guy that also managed to win 10 Gold Gloves. It's Mike Schmidt. And behind the plate, Cap Anson. All kinds of gaudy statistics, but look at that mustache. You could carve a pumpkin on it. With all that talent on the field, you're bound to have some legends on the bench. In the infield, you have a mix of several recent and current players, mixed in with former legends. And the outfield reserves is equally impressive. Several of the career home run leaders. So, what's the catch? Well, if you know a thing or two about roster sizes and you've been keeping count, you'll notice we've already gone through all 25 members of the team. So, when it comes to pitching, we don't know. I mean, I guess they have Babe Ruth, who saw some time on the mound between 1915 and 1919. He actually racked up a career ERA of 2.28 with the bawdy number of 3.6 Ks over 9. But you can't survive on a one-man rotation. We asked the deliberately offensive manager about what his approach was going to be with his pitching staff, and he responded, "Pitching? Don't talk about pitching. Pitching? You kidding me? Pitching? I just hope we don't embarrass the rest of the league. We've got 25 of the best hitters in history taking cuts in Coors Field." We responded with a question about what his approach is going to be when he has his position players pitching at Coors Field, and, well, we can't show you his reply. But suffice to say that today's photocopier technology has brought ass selfies to a whole new horrifying degree of realism. On to the next. The New Jersey Turnpikes. Look out, it's a team with a pitching staff. Although the criteria that we selected this team with is a little shady. All you had to have done to make the Turnpikes team is to serve some prison time, or barring that, get in some pretty serious legal jeopardy. Out of the Park Baseball allows you to pluck players right out of history in whatever year you want. So what we did was we took these players in the season that corresponded most closely to their crimes, allowing us to create our very own longest yard squad. Let's take a look at who we've got in the projected starting lineup. In right field, you have Darryl Strawberry, who committed all the crimes, just all of them. If it's illegal, chances are Darryl's at least thought about doing it. In center field, it's Ron LaFleur. He was actually discovered in prison by the Detroit Tigers, and he tried out for them on a one-day parole. In left field, it's Gates Brown. He was actually discovered while in prison for burglary by the... Is that the Detroit Tigers? Are they aware that they have a minor league system? At first base, Willie Aikens. After his retirement, he attempted to sell 50 grams of cocaine to the police. We're gonna go ahead and guess that that went poorly. At second base, you have Pierce Chiles. There's no way we can possibly fit everything interesting about this man into this video, but we'll do our best with a lightning round. No one actually knows how he died. At some point, he was wanted for illicit relations with a 16-year-old and was pursued by authorities, but he still managed to jump from minor league club to minor league club while being a wanted man. He was known for yelling, "What's the use?" in mockery of hitters that sent pop flies his way. He escaped prison in 1902 and disappeared shortly thereafter, though it's rumored that he still managed to find his way onto other ball clubs after his escape. And lastly, he was the Astros before there were Astros. He was one of the very first sign stealers. Now keep in mind, this all occurred at the beginning of the 20th century. One of his buddies, Morgan Murphy, would be stashed in the center field clubhouse. Given the fact that he had all of 37 at-bats this season and even less the following year, it would seem that Morgan was on the team purely for this purpose. Anyhow, the plan was that Pierce would be coaching third base. Morgan would spot the catcher's signs through the use of binoculars and electronically send a signal over to Pierce through a buzzer-type device that was buried in the ground under his foot. He would then relay that sign to the man at the plate, a man truly ahead of his time. Carrying on with the infield, at shortstop we have Rafael Furcal, who violated his probation, but his sentence was delayed so he could play in the playoffs that year. At third base, Gary Sheffield, 9-time All-Star, 1-time police officer puncher. And then behind the plate you have Charlie Hoover, who was arrested at a ball or party of questionable pretensions, which I think is a nice way of saying there were a lot of hookers. Let's turn to the bench. No scandalous team is complete without Pete Rose. The body count gets its start with Sam Crane, and you've got Jose Offerman, who finally answered the question of why don't they just take the bat with them when they charge the mound. Let's turn to the starting rotation. Doc Gooden, whose cocaine use is going to make him a nice anchor for this rotation. Mike Leake, who stole $60 worth of shirts from Macy's. Absolute monster. Denny McClain, who pretty much went on the organized crime speed run. Vita Blue, more cocaine. And lastly, Blackie Schwam, who killed a guy under the employ of the mob. Mike Leake looking pretty good right about now, yeah? Bringing in the bullpen. You know, when I initially started doing research for this team, I thought there was no way I wouldn't be talking a little bit about Oogie Urbina, as he attempted to murder some farm workers with a machete and assumingly set them on fire. There was also Ted Turner, who stole chickens, but no. The guy I'd like to tell you a little bit more about is Terry Larkin. The story goes that Terry was on a 5-week drinking spree and he had threatened to shoot a grocer and his wife. The police came to investigate and Terry shot his wife and grazed a police officer as well. His wife survived and refused to testify against him. But truth be told, I'm only telling you that story so I could tell you this next one. You see, his wife had survived all of that just to eventually be axe-murdered by her sister. And truth be told, I may only be telling you that story to point out that as crazy as that story is, it actually has some pretty stiff competition for most insane thing on this page. I'll give you a moment. And perhaps the wildest thing out of all of this madness is that the editor of the paper saw it fit to wrap up a story from a previous page whose dramatic conclusion includes the phrase, "I like that hat," said Colonel Murphy, and I'm going to get one like it. Great stuff! Next team. The Weak Prescriptions. Playing at Tropicana Field, a punishment too harsh for anyone with perfect eyesight, we have a collection of the worst fielders in history and the wildest pitchers. Now, that sounds like an obstacle too large to overcome, but be aware that we've chosen players here that have a bit of seasoning on them. No cups of coffee. And just so we don't get into a fight, we'd like to state that we relied heavily on statistics to determine the worst fielders. Specifically, total zone runs above or below average. So in the end, don't blame us, blame math. Let's take a look who we've got. In right field, we have Dave Winfield. You see, this is one of those cases where our man has 7 gold gloves, but also recorded several seasons in the negative double digits for fielding runs below average. In center field, you have Brett Butler, who delivered a whopping negative 24 in fielding runs allowed one season. In left field, it's Gary Matthews the Sr. He led left fielders in errors 4 times in his career. At first base, Jim Bottomley, 223 errors at first base, an unbelievable number. At second base, it's Ray Durham, who had a rich history of defensive futility, landing in the top 5 in errors across 9 different seasons. At shortstop, Derek Jeter, whose defensive abilities seem to be a topic of great debate, but for what it's worth, no player has a poorer career mark in fielding runs allowed in the history of baseball. At third base, Todd Zeile, who sucked at defense so badly that he was moved willy-nilly around the diamond only to find out that he was shittier at each new position than the last. And at catcher, Mike Piazza, who by the end of his career could not stop balls nor throw runners out. On the bench, there's all kinds of further defensive issues, including the man that led all shortstops in errors for 5 straight years in Rafael Ramirez. Turning to the loose cannons, the starting rotation sets up like this. We've got Lou Kretlow, who walked more batters during his career than he struck out. Tommy Byrne, who led the league in Ks over 9 for a season and walks in another 3. Bill Daly, who walked 178 batters in 1890, which is quite remarkable given that pitches in the late 1800s could safely drive within the regulations of most residential areas. Emmett O'Neill, who found himself frequently on the leaderboards in both walks and wild pitches. And lastly, Herb Score, who did much the same as Emmett but somehow still found his way onto the All-Star team twice. I really love the pictures in this rotation. Let me just scroll through them again. Watch. You see how they get progressively more depressed? They know what they've done.
Coming out of the pen, you have several guys that averaged at least 1 walk per inning, but personal exposure to this pen growing up in the Chicago area is Carlos Marmol, who gave us this jam.
That gets by, Chambers will score, and the Cardinals win it.
Haha, I'm scarred for life!
Next, we have a squad of players that have actually played together. This is a group of 25 people that a general manager took a look at and said, yes, this sufficiently meets all the needs of a baseball team playing in the major leagues. Unfortunately, that squad is the 2019 Detroit Tigers. In 2019, the Detroit Tigers were not good. They lost 114 games, walked 391 times compared to 1,600 strikeouts. It was the worst on-base percentage since 1904 for the club. The run differential was at negative 333 by the end of the year. And in a year where there was a record number of home runs being hit around the league, the Tigers had their lowest total since 1963. And lastly, manager Ron Gardenhire actually nearly killed himself with an energy drink. The story goes like this. Daniel Norris came in after the top of the 3rd inning and he saw Gardenhire's face swelling up and breaking out in hives. He asked, "Did I give you hives watching me pitch?" And Gardenhire replied, "No." But then a couple innings later, after Norris had come back, he conceded, "Probably." Oh, and they also gave us this.
Carrying out towards the gap in left center field, carrying back, and it gets over the fence, off the glove, it's a 3-homer game! In unbelievable fashion!
I'm not going to take the time to walk through the starters individually as we're just 2 years removed from the actual team, but I will point out there are some decent players on this squad. Nick Castellanos in right field, Jeimer Candelario at third base. You never know. They might surprise you. The pitching is a little less impressive, including several relievers that have never sniffed the major leagues since the embarrassment they put up that year. But who knows? Everybody deserves a second chance. And that does it. One group down. Let's see what's coming up on the Dugs. On Wednesday, we're going to be taking a look at Group B. And on Friday, the tournament gets started in earnest.
We'll have Deliberately Offensive visiting the New Jersey Turnpikes,
and the week prescriptions visiting the 2019 Detroit Tigers. We'll also have the other 2 Group B games, but we'll learn a little bit more about those in Wednesday's video. Lastly, keep your eyes out. We've posted a preview of what one of those highlight reels are going to look like. We've actually given you a sneak peek by giving you the full set of highlights from the New Jersey Turnpikes at the Deliberately Offensive. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It's really going to increase the chances that the Dugs becomes a success. And it has the extra benefit of that red dot showing up in your profile whenever there's fresh Dugs content. Alright, that does it. I've been Johnny Paprika, hoping that all your balls are fair and all your wood is good. We'll see you on Wednesday, everybody!